Hey there, my name is Fela Abioye, and this is How to Corporate, my digital show about how successful professionals navigate career moves and money matters. Today's topic, how to resign, with my guest, Monique Abioye. So I'm really excited. This is something that I've been working on for a while and really been contemplating and finally be able to bring this to fruition. I've been in corporate America for 10 years, longer. And I really realized over time that we spend a lot of time trying to seek out the right answers, right? And, sometimes we do that by, getting a mentor or, getting advice but you're always trying to make sure you make the right decision so you don't, make a bad decision, right? But we don't always get there. We don't always have the right answers. And there's so many unspoken rules in corporate America that, we don't always know. And I felt like this was important to try to create a platform where we could get those answers, right? From everyday people, from working professionals, from people who are successful in their career. So that's what this show was really all about. So I'm gonna be doing a lot of interviewing with folks and bringing on my own experience to hopefully provide some answers to folks out there who were struggling or wondering, I've never been in this situation, how do I deal with it, and things of that nature. So gonna get into a lot of different complicated career entanglements and stuff like that. So, really excited, but that's what this is all about. So I guess gonna jump right into it. First episode today. Topic is how to resign, and it's actually with my first guest, Monique Abioye. She's an academic advisor working in the education field. Did I mention she's my wife? Yep, she's my wife, but a working professional, of course, a mom, a dreamer, and she has to juggle all those things and deal with me. So with all of that said, Monique, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself or tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. As Fela said, my name is Monique Abioye, and yes, I am his wife. But in addition to that, I'm a career professional, and we oftentimes have very interesting conversations about career moves and money matters. And I'm really excited to be a part of the show and kind of bring some of that energy to the forefront just so that the greater world around us can be a part of these conversations, give us some input on what they think, as well as learn a little something from, our perspective. So hopefully, we can be interacting with all you guys and learning and growing and helping to move the culture forward, through the lens of corporate America. Personally, I am an academic advisor, so that's what I do by day, but I'm also in the creative arts as well. I'm an author, screenwriter, and ghostwriter, so that's kind of what I do on the side for now. And so I'll be a lot of my opinions will be coming from, that particular perspective, with my experiences in the professional world. But again, like I said, I'm really excited to be here, looking forward to a really good conversation, and I hope it's helpful to somebody out there.
So, the reason why, I was thinking about this was, the last year and a half has been nuts, right? Coming off of COVID pandemic, that's something that none of us have seen in any of our lifetimes. I pray to God none of us will ever see again. But, just the changes that have happened over the last year and a half have just been nuts. And if you think about how we defined work and what work looked like, it's just completely turned on its head. So I think about myself, traditionally, I work in the insurance realm and I have been for the last, 10 plus years in the commercial insurance world. And, working in office versus working at home was always a thing. I always had the hybrid mode of being able to do both, right? I work a little bit at home, I work a little bit at the office. I do a little bit of traveling. So I've always had that option. And the company, luckily for me, that I have worked for has always allowed for a lot of that flexibility too. But I know a lot of folks out there, didn't, right? Monique, for yourself, right? you didn't really have the option to work from home before the pandemic, right?
That's correct. In every position I've had, including the one my current position, which I've been with for a few years, um, working from home has literally never been an option. And it's not because myself or my colleagues didn't push for it or advocate for it or ask for it or jokingly kind of be like, hey, maybe we could do this from home. We definitely saw that, at least in my line of work, these were things that we could do virtually, if not full time, at least occasionally, maybe 1, 2 days a week. But, the powers that be just felt like, no, we need to be physically present in the office. And if we cannot lay our eyes on you, then you are not doing anything. And there must be no way to track your productivity other than physically sitting in a space, which I provide. So until the pandemic, I never had the opportunity to even try it, didn't know if I would like it. But actually, I rather enjoyed it. It cut out the commute, it saved on gas and tolls. Like, it just made life a lot more convenient and less stressful. And according to my supervisor, our productivity went up once we started working from home. So, and they are able to track it, by the way. So it took a kind of a violent shove into the new millennium for them to understand that this can be done. But they figured it out. And I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to continue in that capacity, uh, even though things are starting to get better on the pandemic front and the outside is open and we're returning to normal. But I'm hoping that we can try to embrace some of these things that did work for us during the shutdown, and remote work is absolutely one of them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's good perspective because I think a lot of folks have been in the same camp where they never really had the ability to do so. I mean, if anything, the technology has been there for a long time, but us actually utilizing that technology, I think it got forced upon everybody during the pandemic. Of course, you
Hmm.
got your traditional jobs that, you can't do remotely, right? I mean, you
Right.
work in a manufacturing facility or you work in retail. I mean, you got to be in the office, right? But if
Right.
you got a job that can pretty much be done anywhere, I mean, the pandemic really showed that this work can be done. And it's funny because I always hear it from both sides. And I know a lot of folks, a lot of employers out there who probably were really, really hesitant in the beginning because, they never worked from home before. Or just like you said, if out of sight, out of mind, I need to see you to make sure I know that you actually really doing that work. But I think the pandemic has really shown that this work can be done. And I've,
Mhm.
I've talked to a lot of folks, and they've said that they've had record years. There's been some of the most productive year and a half that they've ever seen. And I think there's something to be said around having the flexibility, being able to kind of move when you need to move. Um, that allows folks to be able to work a little more productively. If anything, I feel like I work harder, working from home, than
And I
I
can
do.
vouch for that.
Facts. I mean, because it's right there, right? It's right there. It's you go upstairs, for me, it's upstairs, right? I go upstairs, I log in, right? I mean, I try to make sure I shower every day, but
Come on,
sometimes,
man.
hey, look, come on, look, if you work from home, you cannot tell me that there's not been at least a day or two that I'm just brush my teeth real quick, throw on some deodorant and wow, jump in. Or maybe you worked out, and you did a little wipe off, just for your own sake, right? And jumped on the
No, that's
computer. Hey,
definitely a thing. I've
hey,
definitely gone straight from the workout to the office chair, started working, and then maybe like, okay, it's lunchtime. Let me take a break and go get cleaned up. So you're right. There's a lot of flexibility in being able to work from home. And the work is just right there. You just hop right in when you need to. You take care of business. And like I said, for my office, productivity actually went up when we started working from home. So again, I'm hoping that we can embrace that same model, going into the future.
the expectation is definitely changing, right? As far as people being back in the office. Um, and it's interesting to see because there have been some companies that said, no, we're an in-office kind of company. And it's weird, I guess, a little bit to me to say after a year and a half, if you had all of your employees or 95% of them working from home the last year and a half, to just 100% go back in the office seems a little tone deaf as well,
Mhm.
right? Because it's like, all right, you saw the flexibility. Employees are definitely coming out and speaking about how much either they love it or hate it, because not everybody loves working from home. I know for myself, it was hard for me in the beginning because I like that separation of home and work. So, working from home every day is not necessarily for me. But I know a lot of friends, a lot of folks a lot of colleagues out there who love it. But for companies to kind of come out and just be tone deaf about it, it's a little tough. But it's
Mhm.
interesting because you get why you want folks to be back in the office. There's something to be said for collaboration, to be able, especially if you're new, you're training, to be able to be around people, and honestly, even justifying just costs like real estate, right? I mean,
And
mhm.
if I could just jump right in there and say, like, I fully understand that. I think in some instances, it makes sense to have people be in office or in the building or have them, remote work just a few days a week and be in the office mostly. I think that it's situational, like most things in life. It's not a one size fits all uh, answer to this conundrum. It is situational. It's on a case by case basis. So I think the tone deaf part of it is some employers whose teams could be totally virtual and it worked well for everyone involved, but they won't even consider that. They won't even look at that from the employee's perspective or how it might benefit them as an employer, where they can save on rent or real estate or what have you, the benefits that they might incur from having people work from home. So it's the unwillingness to embrace change just because like we always did it this way, so we're going to keep doing it this way. Like that's not going to fly in this new world. It's just not. And as far as I can tell, from my readings and just kind of keeping my ear to the street, that is what is causing the mass resignation out there with a lot of people in this time, in this transitional time between a shutdown COVID world and a post COVID world. People are taking the opportunity to say, you know what, let me find a career that better fits my needs as a human, as a wife, as a mother, as a person who needs flexibility in order to have a better work-life balance.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, you hit it right on the head, right? I mean, the title of this topic today is How to Resign, right? So, and it's getting at the mass exodus of resignations that have been happening over the last couple of months since the pandemic has started to kind of roll back, and employers are basically telling employees, like, hey, you got to get back in the office. So, some articles have kind of been deeming this or calling it the Great Resignation. And I think this is according to monster.com. So they surveyed nearly 350 employees and in human resources and finance leaders, and they said that 70% said that having employees come back to work is pretty much like top of their mind, right? So, and again, I get it, right? Because we're working this way for a really long time and we've got all these costs out there and you got to justify costs. You can't get around that. So, you have to always recognize that, right? It's not always around, okay, employers are just being, folks, in corporate America just want you to get back to work just because. I mean, there's costs
Mhm.
associated to that because, work from home, you may have to dole out more costs for furniture or, if you pay or people may demand you to pay for internet or, for a desk and things of that nature. And so,
Meaning the employer, right? Like you're saying, the employer
yeah,
would
the
have to pay for
employer. Yeah,
equipment, the employer would
exactly.
have to pay for internet, et cetera. It's more cost to the employer.
Yeah, it could be. It could be, right? But in a lot of aspects, of course, it also can be a savings. But if you just signed I don't know, a 10-year, 20-year lease and
Well,
you're stuck in that
sucks for
lease,
you that the
you
that the
know,
world should literally change at a
yeah.
time when you just signed this lease. But you have to roll with the punches. You have to go with the flow of how the world is changing, because the world is going to change whether you embrace that change or not. And so, what we're finding now, especially with millennials and our generation, like this is not your daddy's workforce. This is not, I'm gonna just take whatever the employers give me, stay for 30 plus years, retire, and just be quiet, be quietly dissatisfied. Like, no, 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 no. We are not doing that. We are saying, you know what? why can't I have it be more convenient and more enjoyable for me and my family? Like it is possible, especially during the pandemic, because we were forced to do it. So it's no longer a hypothetical conversation with employers. We have proof. We lived it out. We've proven the model. We've proven that the work can be done remotely. And for a lot of us, we enjoy doing it that way. So why are you now telling me that I have to come back to work? That is going to work for some people because, like you said, some people like to be in the office, and other people have jobs that are cannot be done virtually, like healthcare and retail and restaurant workers, et cetera. Like can't do that remotely. So we get that. But for those of us whose functions can be remote, it is extremely tone deaf, as you said, to not consider that model moving forward and figuring out how to make it fit this new normal.
There's a lot of people out there, thinking about changing jobs or careers right now. So, I mean, do people really consider whether there's a right or wrong way to resign, or like, I mean, you've been a working professional. I mean, you've been in the industry for, 10 plus years. How would you, or how does one go about resigning?
Yeah, so I have been a working professional for 10 plus years. Thank you for describing it in decades. That
Oh,
doesn't make me feel old at all.
season. That's the word. Season. That's the word we use. Season.
Okay, yes, I am a seasoned professional. That is entirely accurate. And I would say that most people do know the correct way to resign, assuming that they are also seasoned. But for anybody who might be listening who's, brand new to this, maybe this is your first rodeo, and you are trying to figure out, maybe you're part of that mass exodus, the Great Resignation, and you're trying to figure out the best way to gracefully exit. I would say, first of all, there is a way to gracefully exit. It's not just do whatever you want. There's a right and wrong way according to the rules of corporate America. Whether or not anybody has shared that with you, just please know that there is a right way to do it. So that's going to involve a few things, but namely just giving proper notice. When you leave your job, your employer has to replace you with somebody else, and you want them to have time, or at least that's the idea, right? Is to give them some time to figure out what that transition looks like between your exit and the next employee's entrance. So that's when you give notice. You give a written letter or a verbal notice where you say, hey, it's been a pleasure working here, but I'm going to be moving on and pursuing other opportunities. So you want to give proper notice.
So let me ask you there. Let me ask you there, right? So, growing up, right, we were always told, at least from what I can remember, like 2 weeks notice, right? You always give
Right.
somebody 2 weeks, right? So that's kind of like the standard out there. But usually there's situations where you may give less than that, right? Or maybe I don't like my boss, or maybe, what, I don't like this place at all. So should I just leave regardless, right? Because I mean, if a company were try to, let's say lay you off, right? And especially during a time like COVID, where there were plenty of layoffs going on, were they giving employees 2 weeks notices, or were they saying, hey, today's your last day, unfortunately, right? I mean, do we really owe it to employers to give them 2 weeks notices if they don't always do the same thing in return? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, that just comes down to a matter of opinion, I think, at that point. Because if we're going to discuss it based off what is quote unquote right or proper, then yes, the employee does owe the employer notice. And if you don't provide it, you're just taking a bit of a gamble. You're running the risk that that employer may badmouth you to other companies in your industry and make it more difficult for you to, get new opportunities in the future. But I definitely would say that employers do not have to give you notice before letting you go. Is that fair? In my opinion, no. Is that right? In my opinion, no. But that is the way that it is because capitalism, like they just get to do whatever they want to do, and we get to do what they tell us to do. So again, everybody just has to decide for themselves. Are you gonna, do it? Are you going to play by the rules? Are you going to go by the book? Or are you going to modify it in some way to better fit your particular circumstance? Like everybody has to decide that for
Well,
themselves.
I think you brought up some good points, but I'm gonna challenge that, right?
Okay.
That we get to do whatever it is they quote unquote tell us to do, right? Because at the end of the day, even if you work for a big employer or a big corporation or in corporate America, I mean, the same way like you'd be like a freelance artist, I mean, it's the same thing. You're an employee. There's nothing committing, there's no commitment really there long term to say that no matter what, you're going to be here, right? If this, your company goes out of business tomorrow, I mean, the last thing they're worried about is your job at the end of the day. So, at the end of the day, you owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself. Of course, you want to have the relationship with your employer and you want to make sure that, you quote unquote do right by them. But to me, when thinking about how to you know, when thinking about how to quote unquote resign, I think you brought up a lot of good points, but keeping yourself of mind first is definitely, I think, always kind of comes into play here. But, there's a right way to not quote unquote burn down that bridge, right? Because, a lot of situations happen where folks give their notice and they've got a job lined up, and guess what? It gets rescinded. And that's something that I don't think we really think about
Their job
sometimes.
offer gets rescinded from the
Yeah, the
new
job
employer,
offer
you
gets
mean?
rescinded. Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, especially think about during the times of COVID, there are plenty of people who might have been trying to switch roles or switch jobs, and offer got rescinded for one reason or another, and say, "Hey, look, our sales have been cut in half because of COVID. So I thought I was going to be able to offer you this role, but now I can't. I got to figure out. I'm in survival mode now. So but again, right? Employers do what they got to do for themselves. I think employers got to do the same thing for themselves too.
Mentioned, I think that's an excellent point to be bringing up because I actually didn't even know that was a thing, and I'm a woman of a certain age, okay? And I didn't know that that was a thing until COVID, when I had that happen to a friend of mine where they had just accepted a position. And then I think first they got a pay cut. And then the offer was just rescinded. And so that left them in a bad place and they had to, kind of scramble to regroup. I guess at the end of the day, my opinion just boils down to this: do what you feel like you have to do for you. I am in full support of that. But just recognize that whatever it is that you do has consequences, and you need to be comfortable with those potential consequences before you act.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. I think that's fair at the end of the day. You know, giving notice, I think, is always best, right? You want to try to give notice, but sometimes, as far as how lengthy that notice is, I guess it depends on the situation, right? Such a case by case basis.
Yeah.
So that makes me think about, if you decided that, what, I'm going to resign, I'm going to give my notice, should you have had the conversation beforehand with your employer, right? Should you have the conversation and say, hey, look, I'm looking, or I'm thinking about looking, right? I mean, it feels like most people try to say no, right? They kind of keep it to themselves and say, all right, if I start looking, I got to be quiet about it, But I mean, in today's world, I would think that if you're considered valuable and you like the company you work for, but you want to resign because, I don't know, maybe you want, a promotion, or you want more pay or more benefits. You want to be able to work remotely. It feels like you should be able to have a conversation like that. I mean, what do you think?
I think that you should be able to have a conversation like that, but that is not necessarily the case for a lot of people. If you have a really excellent relationship with your supervisor, then it's probably perfectly safe to have such a conversation before you secure another job, because maybe they will either support you in that search and work with you through the transition, or try to like counter before there's even another offer on the table. Maybe they might offer you a promotion or a raise or make some sort of concessions to keep you there. If they truly value, what you bring to the company, they will move mountains to keep you. So if you have that sort of relationship with the employer, great, go for it. But a lot of people don't. Maybe you have either a kind of a toxic relationship with the employer where you guys don't really get along, or maybe there's just an indifference there where you don't really have much of a relationship with them at all. And you could come or go and they wouldn't bat an eyelash because there's just not really much of a relationship there. So for the two latter groups that I described, I would definitely say maybe you want to keep it close to the chest. You want to do your search quietly. And once you've secured an offer, like they've offered you the job and you've accepted it, then you can begin to discuss it with, colleagues or your supervisor. And at that point, maybe even they might want to counter. Again, if they truly value you, they will do whatever they have to do to try to keep you, if they're able to do that. But again, that comes after you have secured that new position. So I think for most people, the majority of people in the workforce, you're not going to have pre-discussions. That's with your employer or with your colleagues. You're going to keep it close to your chest. And then once you've secured the next move, then you can discuss it if you wish.
So that actually brings up another point that I really gravitate towards about discussing it with colleagues. I think sometimes folks make the mistake of having a, you know, I don't call it a big mouth, but just honestly just talking too much, right? I mean, you're thinking about leaving, you're disgruntled or whatever the case may be. So you're going around complaining or you're going around telling your friends or colleagues like, hey, look, I'm looking, I'm out here on a search. I mean, think about the repercussions of that, right? I mean, if you're a manager or your employer finds out that you're looking, right? I mean, they decide, hey, I'm gonna cut ties with you, right? So I mean, being discreet about making those kind of decisions, I think is definitely always key, right? Because you may be upset for the day or maybe thinking about leaving, but maybe you're not really ready to leave yet, right? Do you think, well, have you ever seen any situations where folks kind of make that mistake? Or what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I have not seen it, or I haven't seen it, but I do understand exactly what it is that you're saying. Because if you talk to some trusted people and those people talk to the people that they trust, and then those people talk to the people that they trust, these whispers can start to get around and then maybe land in the ear of your supervisor or somebody in a decision making role. And once they know that you're, looking to make a move, they may say, okay, yeah, we're good. You can go. Like we're moving on. So you don't want to leave yourself vulnerable to those types of unexpected occurrences. So that's the main reason why you probably don't want to be sharing with too many people. If you can share with no one, I personally think that's best because that's the only way you know for sure you're protected. But if you have some trusted colleagues, go for it. But you want to share with as few people as possible because in doing so, you're just protecting yourself. You're making sure that your employer, even if it's not maliciously or with like, oh, let me stick it to Monique because she's trying to leave. Like it's not even on that energy. It's just them looking out for their bottom line. It's them looking out for their productivity. If I have a vacancy, that affects what I'm trying to achieve as an employer. So I want to preemptively fill the spot. And while I logically understand that, I don't want to be pushed out the door before I'm ready to go. Like I have bills, I have, goals, like I need to be able to leave on my own terms. And the best way to secure that is just to play it close to the chest. Like don't share with too many people, do your search quietly, and then provide proper notice. If you wish to give more than 2 weeks, you can do that. It's not customary. The customary thing to do is give 2 weeks. But if you really like your job and you think they would really benefit from having a more advanced notice, you can do that too. You can give them 3 weeks. You can give them a month. You could tell them as far in advance as you would like to. But my personal recommendation is just don't say anything or don't put that notice in until you are legit ready to move on.
Okay, got you. And what about telling your employer where you're going, right? I mean, that sometimes that comes up in conversation, right? You put in your notice, and they say, okay, where are you going to? Are you going to a competitor, or are you getting out of the industry that you're working in? Any thoughts on whether you should reveal where you're going? If you put your resignation in.
I think that most people would say to that you don't want to share that. But there you need to do so in a diplomatic way. Like you don't want to be weird or awkward or rude about it. Like, well, I'm not telling you because that's not your business. Like, no, we don't want to be on that energy because for the sake of preserving relationships and not burning bridges. So you don't want to be that weird person who's like doesn't know how to broach the subject where it's clear you don't want to tell me, but you're trying not to say that you don't want to tell me. So there's a way to finesse it, like there's a way to go about it, but I think my personal opinion is I think there is a way to kind of again keep that close to the chest. Don't share too much. Don't maybe you don't want to tell, but you want to do it in a way that is diplomatic and thoughtful and just kind of answers their question without having to specifically name the place that you're going. And the reason why most people feel that way, for anyone who may be curious, is you don't want your you don't want their perception of you or their opinions of you, et cetera, to precede you. You don't want them to hear where you're going and then they start talking to those folks and sharing things that you may or may not want them to know, or giving background details that you may or may not have wanted to bring with you to this fresh start in this new position. basically, or maybe they're keeping tabs on you, or just anything like that. Um, so yeah, so for those reasons, you don't want to leave yourself vulnerable to whatever your employer may want to do with that information. So for that reason, I would not suggest sharing, where you're going.
No, I think those are good points, excellent points for sure. I mean, I think, it's so situational, but I think it definitely boils down to your reason for resigning, right? I mean, you don't always, people resign for multiple reasons, and it's not always because they're unhappy with the place that they work necessarily. So, if you got a good relationship with, your manager or the company that you work with and saying, hey, look, I'm leaving because of pretty clear reasons, and these are it, and you guys can't meet that, or I've outgrown my role, or I've outgrown this company, or whatever the case may be, hey, there's no hard feelings. It can be say, hey, look, this is where I'm going, and it is what it is. So, but like you said, it's about trying to keep some form of relationship, trying not to burn a bridge. So hopefully, because hey, you never know, you may have to come back and cross it. So no, those are definitely good points there too.
And can I
But
just add to that?
mhm,
When we talk about not burning a bridge, you might need a reference letter, or maybe you might need a
true.
referral in the future. Maybe you're in the job market again after some period of time, and you want to call back to that old boss and say, "Hey, I'm in the field. I'm looking. Is there anybody that you can recommend me to? Are there any positions out there that I might be a good fit for? Like, can you help plug me in?" Like, you just may need to lean on these people in some capacity at some point in the future. So you want to leave the door open by exiting gracefully.
No, those are definitely excellent points for sure. Because if you flip the bird to your manager as you walk out the door, I would hope you would have considered whether you're going to need a referral, uh,
Exactly.
from them in the future. So no, for sure. At the end of the day, before anybody decides to change roles or leave the company that they're working with or whatever, you got to make sure you do your homework. You got to make sure you do your homework, know what you're stepping into, know the situation that you're moving out of, weigh the pros and cons, and try to hopefully not do it from an emotional place. Because sometimes we get caught up in the moment. Sometimes, we have a really bad day or a really bad week, or we're in a situation that we feel like, man, there's no end out. But if we take a second step back, think about it pragmatically, we can kind of figure out, okay, is this just a bad situation I'm in right now? Is this just a bad day? Is this a bad company? And really decide, should I move on from that, right? Because those are the decisions sometimes that, you make the wrong one, you may not realize it till after the fact. So, but no, like I said, Monique, you made a lot of great points here. I think you dropped a lot of major keys along the way here. I kind of jotted down a couple here, but I mean, there were so many. But some of the ones I got here is, so if you're out there looking, hey, make sure you keep that stuff close to the chest. Don't burn a bridge. So whether that's you need being able to walk back over to that bridge for an prior employee or recommendation or relationships, again, like don't burn a bridge if you can help it. Sometimes it can't be helped. And you got to set that thing aflame. So, but if you can help it, try not to burn a bridge. Be ready to go the day you give your notice. That's not something that we really talked about it, but it's something I thought about, right? Because sometimes folks give their notice and they think that, okay, I'll work through my 2 weeks, et cetera, et cetera. But you may not realize the minute you give your notice, that's it. You're done. You're out the door.
Yeah.
So I
And if
hope
I
you.
can just jump in really quick and say, I
Mhm.
have personally experienced that some years ago when I gave my notice. I gave a 2 week notice, and they called me in maybe an hour later and said, "Hey, we don't need you to work your 2 weeks. You can go right now." Now, fortunately, I did have a good relationship with them and they paid me through my notice, but that's not a guarantee. Like,
No, it's not a
somebody might
guarantee
be
at all.
letting you go that same day, and they're not going to be paying you for those 2 weeks that you thought you were going to be paid. So that's something else to keep in mind when you're searching and you're ready to, hand in that notice. Do it at a time when you are really ready. You're ready to walk out the door at that moment with the money you have in your pocket, because there really are no guarantees once they know you're ready to move on.
Yeah, no, for sure. Excellently put. And really, lastly, I would say, talk to your employer. Even though you're looking, you never know. You may be able to negotiate what the situation is. If you're unhappy for various reasons, or you're seeking, a promotion, or you want flexibility because you want to be able to work from home. If you got a good working relationship with your employer and you think that they have value or they see value in you, you never know. Sometimes you just gotta, closed mouths don't get fed. So you open up and you have to have those conversations. You might get what you need and be able to stick around if that works to your best interest. So, but yeah, that's really about it. And again, closing out first episode. Really appreciate you again, Monique, for joining us.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. For more content, please click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms at How to Corporate. Until next time, keep building.